Let's talk hydrogen, the H2 Hub Hydroverse podcast. We talk to experts from the world of hydrogen and molecules. The big international innovation event will then take place on June 26th at this year's Hydroverse convention in Essen, Germany. Find all the details at hydroverse-convention.com.
Welcome to Let's Talk Hydrogen, the podcast where we dive into technologies and strategies and talk to people shaping the hydrogen economy of tomorrow. I'm your host, Uwe Kerkmann, CEO of H2 Hub. In today's episode, we'll explore whether our current strategies for hydrogen, technically, politically, and regulatory, are actually pointing in the right direction and paving the right way forward, or if we are betting on wrong horses. And we will ask the question, should we allow ourselves to try more and fail more bravely when it comes to hydrogen ideas and projects before we fail probably altogether? To help to unpack this, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Armin Schnettler, CEO of P3 Energy Solutions. Welcome, Armin, to the podcast. And thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to share some thoughts with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Uwe. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here together with you and you all.
Okay, so let's start right away. To kick things off, when we look at where we are with the hydrogen economy today, would you agree or disagree that the right description is that we are beyond a hype phase? Or are we indeed entering a period of real practical implementation? What's your take on the topic of hydrogen hype?
It's a good question to start, Uwe. I would say we have left the hype phase. I mean, typically new economies, they often trigger a hype phase in the beginning, followed by a consolidation, also said valley of death, right? And finally entering into a growth phase, and here we are. Looking a couple of years back, for sure that has been, I would say today, an unhealthy and overpacing hype phase. And often or mainly driven by quite visionary announcements, unfortunately partly to drive IPOs, virtual enterprise values, which is the bad side of the hype, and rather than profound business driven plans or even implementation plans. Today, I would say, and luckily, we are in a phase where we see many projects are now being built or with FIDs taken or close to be taken, and even more projects in concrete FEED, front-end engineering design phases, right? So to give an example, currently we see a lot of projects in FEED or under construction than we had the years before.
And from I think that's a very good description. And from your point of view, when we look at this situation that we only deal with very intensive discussions, strategies, and project buildings in hydrogen, it's just a couple of years. I mean, like 5-6 years ago, hydrogen was not as important as it is now in the discussion to solve decarbonization problems, to help follow net zero goals. But from your point of view, in the couple of years, are there milestones, bigger milestones that you see that have been achieved in the recent years?
Certainly. I mean, first of all, regulations are in place. Yeah, they have, of course, to be optimized. You know, the discussions we have around the globe. Subsidies have triggered projects in the higher, double-digit megawatts project size range. I mean, today, average project sizes when we are talking about hydrogen, green hydrogen projects, is around 30 megawatts, the average. But what we see are project sizes with several hundred megawatts are being built right now around the globe and quite often also in Europe. So interestingly, so the situation is not good as it has been during the hype phase virtually, but now we are in the implementation phase. And that's definitely a significant milestone, and that was desperately needed. You know, it's good to have plans, nice announcements, a lot of PowerPoints, But at the end of the day, only projects we have realized are key. And just last year, 2024, globally around 3 gigawatt of new electrolyzer installations, say hydrogen projects, have been added. Of course, mostly in, say, 50% around in China, but nevertheless, 1.5 gigawatt in outside China. And this is what is very important. And we should not forget, we need to learn. It's not a mature business yet, and we would like to build a new area, the hydrogen era. And 5 years ago, we had more or less, as you said, we had dreams, announcements, right? 3 years ago, we had massive capacity increase plans and sometimes implemented. Since last year, we already see a consolidation running with major commercial problems of a couple of OEMs, which is relatively early in the phase. If we compare to the wind industry, to the substation industry and so on, so in the energy industry, also commercial problems with project developers. But this year we definitely see, how can I say, a light at the end of the tunnel, projects being realized, FIDs taken, but also consolidation. Not all, say, electrolyzer OEMs and partner companies will survive, of course.
May I ask, when you say it is compared to other sectors or industries, it's probably somewhat early that there was a consolidation and challenges for some OEMs. What do you think is an explanation for that? What makes the hydrogen thing kind of special in this respect?
I think the hype phase, I mean, hydrogen, we were talking for decades, yeah, but the last hype phase was extraordinary. I mean, requests coming from project developers to build capacities in the gigawatt range. So this was a tremendous virtual market pull, which was not there. And so if you have a view on the say electrolyzer, on the market player landscape around the globe, we are talking about more than 100 or hundreds of electrolyzer companies, just to take this as an example, with all the sub-suppliers and so on. And so it was too fast. And that's why due to the delays, changing in, financing figures and so on, interest rate increase, and this realized or consolidated, this triggered the consolidation much earlier than expected, but needed.
I see. Today, recently, there was a new number. It's roughly 240 electrolyzer manufacturers around the world, which is a big number. Because I talked to a startup today, and they said when they started a couple of years ago, there were 30 known producers of electrolyzers. So I agree, the market is growing. So talking about these kind of positive milestones and the development of the market, this is one perspective. And the other is, of course, there is a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about the hydrogen business and hydrogen market development. You talk to a lot of people, you are working with a lot of interesting companies. What kind of misconceptions or misunderstandings do you come across when you run into people?
Maybe the biggest challenge is that we have projects, we have capacities and so on, but we do not really have a mature offtake market. This is what we miss. And maybe this was maybe one item we should have made in terms of subsidies differently. We should have put regulation in place, maybe putting more subsidies on creating the market, say the off-taker, the market pool, and the rest will come, right? Follow the money is relatively easy to say. Instead, we subsidized the capacity increase of OEMs. So forgetting that there must be, even for project developers, there must be somebody who is taking the hydrogen, who is taking the methanol and ammonia. And this definitely was the misconception overall. So with the latest auctions here in Europe, I mean, we see that it is now focusing on the projects, on the subsidies for hydrogen, for instance. So creating some kind of a market pull. So the European Hydrogen Bank, Contracts for Difference, H2 Global, to name a couple. This is something we are on the right track, and this is something which is triggering at least some smaller demand. But we need more. We need more, and I think we need a stronger regulation. We will come to this maybe during our podcast. But we need more, say, regulation to trigger the demand.
That's an interesting point, and we will definitely come back to the off-taker side. But before we come to that, and strongly, of course, related to it, we see a lot of large-scale projects realized and built, especially in the Middle East, in China, but also we have big projects scheduled in Europe. My first question would be probably to look at the situation in Germany. Do you see a trend towards large-scale projects? And the question connected to that is it really a good way to focus on large-scale projects, or would decentralized smaller projects would be a better way to address off-takers' needs and an off-taker market? What's your take on that?
I think we need both. We need large projects and smaller ones, centralized and decentral ones. And we need infrastructure investments, and we need, say, producing units, producing plants. Talking about Germany, we ever had imported energy, say oil, gas, and so on. And in the future, it will be methanol, ammonia, green hydrogen, and all of that. So we need a large-scale infrastructure from the central harbors in the north, more or less, or pipelines, in order to distribute it to the large consumers, industry, chemical industry, steel industry, and so on. This we need. But we also need, and this is something which can be related to, spread around, larger solar PV plants or decentral wind farms, in combination with really cheaper getting battery energy storage systems to ensure, more operating hours of electrolyzers and hydrogen production. So we will have decentral hydrogen production units and plants for smaller consuming, applications.
And would you agree that probably a more decentralized, like smaller plants, would also be a good way to test technologies and to test integrated technologies into existing industry and sector structures? Because you said in the beginning, we are still in a phase where we need to test technologies, and we always say everybody is a first of a kind producer, because nobody really has built several gigawatt plants in the past, and everybody is doing it for the first time. It's not only the startups, but also the big corporations. But would you agree it could be an interesting thing to trigger more small projects in order to have more testing, to have more proof of concept, to have more demonstration? Could this be an interesting way?
We need demonstrations, so research, development, and demonstration projects, certainly. I would separate the decentral approach in the mature technology for commercial use, and of course, pilot projects if you have, breakthrough technologies, put it that way. I don't see them coming very soon. There are lots in the market, interesting parts, but for the time being, it's alkaline and PEM technology. If you're talking about hydrogen, SOEC and AEM coming. But then there are a lot of nice ideas. But first of all, we need to increase the maturity, the reliability, availability, degradation effects, and so on. And we are on a good way there. And parallel to that, driving costs down. So this is, and this both for large scale, for import and infrastructure, hydrogen backbone, for instance, and decentral, say, a couple of megawatts, 10, 20 megawatts for the decentral approach, maybe even offering ancillary services, say flexibility to even to reduce maybe a grid expansion. Yeah, so for the power system.
Good. So now coming to the customer, we mentioned already the importance of offtake and offtake agreements. At P3 Energy Solutions, you work closely with so many companies across different industries. And who's actually buying hydrogen, or who is signing offtake contracts, and what's the purpose of the hydrogen for those clients?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there is a hydrogen market right now. Yeah, for more than 90 million tons a year of hydrogen is used, but mainly as over-the-fence business. And this is an existing market. It will take time to transform this business into, say, a green business. Talking about the green ones, you have seen the contracts, especially in the maritime, say, shipping industry and in aviation industry, shipping ahead a little bit, the contracts for methanol, for ammonia, companies, not putting names here in the podcast, so we are not a marketing institution here, but developing engines, combustion engines running on hydrogen, running on say methanol and ammonia. So this will come. And also the steel industry. Yeah, you see in Sweden, say greenfield approach to build a green steel factory there. I mean, they have quite good preconditions, cheap electricity or relatively cheap electricity over the year. They produce hydrogen. So this is something, but also in Germany, and we as the German government is spending, how can I say, a hell of a lot of money to make this happen, at least the technology development and getting started. But we have not yet finished the hydrogen, say, purchase procurement. So let's wait and see how this will develop over time, because at the end of the day, somebody or we all have to pay. So what is the outcome must be cost competitive.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you, what customers care about most. Is it the price? Of course, it will be a price question, but is it also availability, even sustainability, probably the color of hydrogen, because you need a special color to get special subsidies, whatever, or is it something else entirely? What's the customer's need there and the customer's approach?
I mean, good question, Uwe. Typically, the first thing you hear is about the price or the cost, right? So certainly off-takers are quite cost sensitive. However, when you're digging a little bit into the ground, going into the details, the feedback we typically get is related to the full package. So entirely, it's about the cost, of course, very important, especially if you're driving a global business. Then certainly it's all about cost and availability. Because if you purchase something which you are not sure if it is really available when you need it, then you need to look for a backup. This is even more expensive. There are a couple of players in the market. They would love to offer, say, green hydrogen or whatever as a backup at a very interesting price for them. And certainly the color code you mentioned, I would put it in a different way, the CO2 reduction. We need to stop talking about colors of green or blue or yellow or whatever, because what we need is some kind of fulfilling CO2 reduction targets, right? So we need some kind of a certification and a tracking of the raw materials, say hydrogen or derivatives. And this certification process is not really yet established. It is by far too complicated, a lot of manual work to be done. And what we need for the future is, say, talking about CO2 footprint or emissions of a certain product. And this must be transparent traceable, and scalable for a new industrial economy.
Okay. So you're really addressing like the economic aspects of it, price, and there has to be a great system for that. So that brings me to a question. Do you see a gap probably that between what politics are designing and what the market is offering and what the companies really need or the customers really need? Because you talked about the importance of subsidies, you talked about the importance of subsidizing a market and probably the transformation of industries that is really needed and where politics and the state is really needed. But do you have the feeling that there sometimes is a gap what politics is offering and what the customer really needs?
Yeah, what shall I say? Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, I mean, typically there's a good big thing behind in the beginning, and then there's maybe sometimes shooting out of the hip. There are nice announcements by the governments. I mean, let's go back 5 years when we were talking about these German Reallabore, the sandbox projects, to help the industry to build, say, 100 megawatt projects, which would have helped us a lot getting learning effects and so on. The Chinese did it. We were talking about this. Nothing happened. So this was definitely good intention, but nothing done. But today, I mean, it was a interesting, it was a very positive start. Then valley of death in that situation as well. Now we are on a good way. We have the regulation, which is reliable, maybe more reliable in Europe than on the other side of the Atlantic. But what we need is a little bit more pragmatism. When I have a look on, the additionality of green power to produce green or CO2 or clean hydrogen, I mean, this is by far overregulated. This is definitely something we need to work on, but this is how it is, and we have to learn with that and then take a decision, get rid of the, say, overregulation and then do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that sometimes regulation and especially overregulation is a result of trying to cover all the possible risks we have and try to figure out the perfect and 120% secure way of dealing with things. And that brings me to our last question or the last topic it's about innovation and risk culture. I mean, we are in the development of a new market, and we at H2 Hub are working with a lot of interesting startups from Europe, from all over the world. And of course, innovation and risk taking is imminent in startup activities. What do you think about the risk taking in hydrogen? Is there enough risk taking, or are we playing it too safe? With you mentioned all the regulatory aspects that we try to solve all at the same time, the colors and the provenance of the hydrogen and what's produced when and where. Should we take more risks here? Should we be more innovative in a way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about entrepreneurship, innovation, and innovation is, putting knowledge into money at the end of the day, right? Of course, risk culture should not, especially not in the hydrogen field, related to safety. So these are two different sides of a medal. And so when we are talking about risk culture, then is about being fast, doing the learnings, failing. We typically don't have a failure culture that compared to US and China as well, right? So I feel it's much more, sexy or whatever, when we are talking about doing something, making it happen, making even failures rather than creating PowerPoint strategies, announcements, and so on. But what we also need to say is, there have been a lot of people taking a lot of risks during the hype phase, investing into companies, investing into visions and ideas. And Many made a hell of a lot of money, but even more lost a lot of money and their jobs also partly. So there is some kind of an entrepreneurship, a culture is there definitely. The hype was unhealthy, as we all know. But if we take it on a more serious way and less hype type, I think this would be good. Doing less, but quicker.
I see. Okay. So doing less but quicker, taking risk and being innovative. If you could make one bold move in the hydrogen space with no constraints, what would that be?
I would be definitely technology and solution agnostic. So not saying you have to do this and that, and setting clear CO2 reduction targets for, like we have it in automotive. Yeah. So it started with 160 grams CO2 per kilometer and so on and so on. And setting targets for products, raw materials, say CO2 emissions, for all applications, for all products, but track it. And this brings me back to the certification system to avoid cheating and so on, but be technology and solution agnostic. So drive a path and let the market and engineers, I'm an engineer, let market and engineers decide.
Very good. And I hope that many policymakers and companies are listening to this podcast and take this as an advice, because I think that would be really a very good and a very bold move. Armin, we already come to an end of this episode, and it is on me to thank you very much for this open and insightful conversation. It is clear to me, to us, when it comes to hydrogen, we are navigating a space full of complexity. And thanks to people like you, we have some navigators showing us the way, or one way of dealing with this complexity. So thank you very much for sharing some thoughts with us. And we are very much looking forward to your keynote speech at the Hydroverse Convention. And with that, we are wrapping up today. Please stay tuned if you like this episode for further episodes of Let's Talk Hydrogen, the H2 Hub podcast. The next stop is the Hydroverse Convention on June 26th in Essen, where the hydrogen community from all over Europe meets in person to keep the dialogue going. So if you enjoyed this conversation, come and find us there. Thanks for listening and see you soon. And thanks again, Armin, for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
That was Let's Talk Hydrogen, the H2 Hub Hydroverse podcast. Get your ticket for the Hydroverse Convention and meet the leading experts from the world of hydrogen. All details at hydroverse-convention.com.